Morning, my friends. Lovely to see you all, and welcome to another Mr. Dilly Meet Time, Mr. Dilly. We have some great guests coming up for you today. So all our guests are going to be we're going to be speaking about them and putting some of your questions to them as well. But before we do it, we're going to go to a bit of a favorite here on Mr. Dilly Meets, which is the Just a Minute. There we go. And by magic, they're all here. Give us all a big wave. There we go. Big wave. Give us a big shout hello for all the children watching.
Hello.
There we go. Fantastic. Okay, now, this is always a favourite because obviously you've been working on these books for, some time, but you only have a minute to talk about the whole story of them. Obviously, that's not quite true. We're going to talk about it a bit more in your interviews as well. We're going to start with Anne-Marie, and then to you, Guy, and then Nicky, and then Abby. I don't know if it's better coming last. Or it's harder. It's worse, isn't it? It's I can't really last. And when I say go, okay, you'll go to full screen. This will be the same for all of you. I'll have my timer here in the studio. When we get to the end of your minute, I will blow this incredible. What a musician I am. Kazoo. I don't know what tune it's going to be, but it could be something like that. In which time you have to stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye to Abby, Nicky, and Guy now, and just be Anne-Marie. So pay attention because Anne-Marie is going to be. I'm sure she's going to be brilliant at this. So Anne-Marie, hello.
Hello.
So how are we feeling about going first with this? We're feeling
very nervous. Yes, very nervous.
First of all, just to give the book you'll be speaking about is the Royal. It's slightly weird on my green screen here. The Royal Jewel Plot, a mystery to see, the second in the series. We'll speak more about that in just a moment. So we're going to give you 1 minute on the timer here in a minute. So you're going to go full screen, and then when you hear that kazoo, it's time to wherever you're at.
Just stop.
You're going to stop. 3, 2, 1.
So the Royal Jewel Plot is the second in my Mysteries at Sea series. The first book was Peril on the Atlantic, which came out last August and was Waterstone's Children's Book of the Month. The Royal Jewel Plot takes up about a month after Peril on the Atlantic, and it's about Alice, 12-year-old Alice, and her brother Sonny. They're on a luxurious yacht called the Lady Rose, which is hosting the King of England and his friend Mrs. Wallis Simpson on board, and they're cruising the coast of Yugoslavia, now called Croatia. And the King of England is on board, and also on board is a beautiful aquarium with a poisonous octopus and a very precious opal, and both go missing. So Alice has a new mystery at sea to solve, and this mystery takes her to the streets of Dubrovnik, a chase across the city walls, a very perilous sea swim involving golf balls hit by the King of England, a very stormy sea, and a visit to the hospital. And Alice finds out everybody on board the Lady Rose has a secret to hide, and everybody could be the culprit.
Look at that. That was pretty professional. I'm going to give you a round of applause. That was really good. It's quite nerve-wracking, that, isn't it? Do you know
very. You've got to speak very quickly. Yeah.
I know. That's not my book, and I'm not talking about it, but I get nervous. That's good for you. Well done for kicking it off, Anne-Marie. We'll be speaking to you again in just a little bit. We're going to bring in Guy Bass. Hello, Guy. How do you think Anne-Marie did? Pretty good?
Hi, that's a tough act to follow. That was really smooth. Yeah.
I thought that. It was. So are you feeling You're feeling primed? You're pretty ready to go?
I was, yeah. I mean, I like the kind of my own voice.
No, I was. Okay, no pressure at all. 3, 2, 1.
Hi. So this is Taking Shelter, a Hugh Dunnit mystery, which is the first in a new series illustrated by the brilliant Lee Cosgrave, all about Hugh Dunnit, a self-proclaimed detective who sees mysteries to be solved and cases to be cracked wherever he goes. And in this book, Hugh finds a dog in a bus shelter, and he decides that this dog is destined to be his best friend. And he names the dog Shelter and takes it home, and his mum and dad reluctantly let him keep it. And that's when the trouble starts, because Shelter has a habit of chewing everything she finds. When she chews, when Hugh finds his homework shredded, Hugh's mum and dad accuse Shelter of the crime and threaten to take her to the shelter. And that is when Hugh decides that he has to clear Shelter's name, clear his friend's name, and find out who the real culprit is, who really shredded his homework.
Guy, that was very, very good. And also had a lovely sort of end to it there. Sort of came to a natural flow there. So I think you did very, very well yourself.
Yeah,
should be proud of yourself. Yeah, no, it was really, really good. So well done, guys. We'll be speaking to Guy a bit more later on. So now we're going to welcome Abi Elphinstone. So let's welcome Abi. Okay, Abi, how you doing? Good?
Yes.
That was good. Okay, so Abby's going to be talking about Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons for 1 minute. Okay, now I think they both did pretty well. What do you think?
Yeah, I was wanting Gus just to to fail, but he didn't, and so now that's put a lot of pressure on me. So
It has put a lot of pressure. It has put a lot of pressure. It has put a lot of pressure. So it was going to be Abi last. I just realised that, but Nicky now it seems to be. It's just gone into a different order on my screen. So Nicky, you are now last. Again, it could be easier, could be harder when we get to Nicky. So okay, so Abi, here we go. So ready? Come on, Abi. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
So all her life, 10-year-old Ember Spark has been waiting for an adventure. Only the adventure seems to be running late, very late. Then, one perfectly ordinary Sunday afternoon, strange things start happening. Ember discovers a mysterious creature trapped on a rock out at sea. Ember's teacher, Mrs. Rickety Knees, gives Ember a really strange assignment in class, one that contains instructions rather than times tables. Go to Stone Chatter Castle and help Rusty Fizzbang. So Ember and a boy called Arno Whisper go to find Rusty Fizzbang. He turns out to be a vet to magical beasts, and he's on the hunt for 2 new apprentices. 2 kids to help him, help with dragon hatchings and mending unicorns' hooves and tending to injured hippogriffs. So the 2 of them, Ember and Arno, join ranks and help Rusty Fizzbang in his quest to become this vet to magical beasts. But there are bigger problems afoot. Somebody is stealing magical beasts.
Oh, look at that. I know.
Who and why?
That was good. Very, very good. I know, got there. Okay, we're speaking to Abi again later on, of course, about Ember Spark. So now, finally, we welcome back Nicky Smithdale. Come on, Nicky. Feeling good?
Hello. Last. Okay. I can't believe it.
I know. Sorry, you just, yeah. I know. Realised as I got Abi on, I thought Abi was going to be like, but it doesn't matter. We're here now, so you're going to round all this off. So, Nicky's going to be speaking about her debut. It's all very odd. You better hold up on your screen. Mine's gone a slightly green screeny. So Betty Steady and the Toad Witch. Okay, Nicky, here we go. Hand over to you. 3, 2, 1, and
Betty Steady and the Toad Witch is a mad comedy magical fantasy illustrated by the amazing Sarah Horn. It stars Betty, who is basically a massive show-off. She's the guardian of Wobbly Rock and defends her castle from all sorts of nasty beasts and baddies. But she does it all on her own because she knows that she's the strongest and the coolest. She's so cool that she names her biceps Linda and Greg. And she rides a stunning horse called Simon Anderson, who wears tiger print cycling shorts. But one day, a slimy old toad witch tricks her and casts a shrinking spell on her and shrinks her down so she's really tiny, the size of a toilet roll. And now she's very small and very grumpy, and she has to find a way to try and stop the Toad Witch from attacking the castle. Luckily, she gets help from some great new pals along the way, including Fig, who's a boring paperwork nerd, LMNOP, who's a trumpet-playing mouse.
No, you did really, really good. Give yourself a big round of applause. That's fantastic. So lovely to have you with us this morning. Thanks for that bit of fun earlier. That was a lot of fun. So the Royal Jewel plot, I loved the book. It was it's my wife's a big sort of caper fan. You know, she loves Agatha Christie and stuff like that. So this kind of book kind of worked in terms of that, obviously, but for kids and stuff. So this is the second in this series. Obviously, you've got a third one coming out later in the year. Same characters, different ships. So tell us a little bit about Alice and Sunny, where they are at the beginning of this story. You kind of like without giving too much away, where it ended up at the end of the last story, and where we find them at the beginning of this story. Because is it like a month after the events of the last?
Yeah, it's about a month after Peril on the Atlantic ends, and
yeah.
I suppose it is a bit of a spoiler, really, if you haven't read Peril on the Atlantic. But Alice and Sunny are brother and sister, and they find that out at the end of Peril on the Atlantic. And I can't really help that spoiler because that's how it goes into the Royal Jewel plot. And they've inherited this amazing luxury yacht from their grandfather, who has kept them apart. He's quite an evil guy, really. So they've rediscovered each other. They're on this amazing yacht. Their father's taken command of it. He was on the Queen Mary as a staff captain, now wanting to command this yacht, the Lady Rose. and they're traveling along the coast of Dubrovnik, now called Croatia, coast of Yugoslavia, now Croatia. And the King of England, King Edward VIII, is on board this yacht, and it's kind of based on real historical events. So the king really did take this voyage that Alice and Sonny are taking on a yacht very similar to the Lady Rose.
That's what I was going to ask you about this. What's wonderful about it is obviously you've got this sort of it obviously is a children's book, but you've got this kind of crime mystery sort of whodunit kind of paper thing. But also you've got this wonderful historical element kind of woven into it. So I was going to ask you. So the lady in the first book, the Queen Mary ship was a real ship, and was the Lady Rose is that a real ship as well?
No, she's not. So the Queen Mary, and I have a little model here. That's my little model found in an antique shop of the Queen Mary, which is quite incredible. But no, the Lady Rose is based on a real yacht called Narlin, and this is a yacht that the King of England cruised on. So I based the whole layout on it, and at the front of the Royal Jewel Plot there is a lovely little plan, and the illustrations in the book are by Marco Guadalupe, an Italian illustrator. And he did the amazing cover and also all the insides as well. And so this yacht is based on Narlin. So it kind of, I became a bit of a yacht nerd, sort of researching yachts and what it looked like inside.
Does that help you actually having the actual, being able to find an actual ship that's based on, and sort of how the layout of all that, and kind of, did that help in terms of like a plotting of the book and kind of where they could go?
Oh yeah, totally. I think with all my books, I have to have a really strong sense of place and a really strong sense of what the setting is like in order to be able to write. And that normally involves visiting places. So I did actually go to Croatia to help research this book. I'd written the first draft, I think, and I went to kind of really help map it out and flesh out the scenes where Alice and Sonny are in Dubrovnik trying to uncover the mystery of who's stolen this gem and what happened to the octopus. But yeah, in terms of the yacht, it really helped having sort of plans of the yacht, so I could kind of work out where my characters were going and what they were doing.
I mean, I have nothing to do with that, but I'd imagine I went on the don't know if anyone knows, or any children watching, the HMS Belfast, which is obviously not a cruise ship, but the big warship on the Thames in London. I went on that recently with my son, and when you see all those different rooms and different kind of how it all kind of works, it really does. It's really evocative. It really brings so much to life, doesn't it? And it must really help with your characters in terms of what they do. Now the sea, I read that somewhere. I think was it on your website? Not sure. The sea, the sea's always been a large part of your life in a way. Tell us a bit about that, and how did that inspire this book series in terms of that?
Yeah, so my dad, who is sadly no longer with us, he was an engineer, chemical engineer. So he travelled a lot for his job. So travelled and worked abroad quite a bit. And he had nothing against flying at all. We flew a lot, but he also loved going by sea. He was a real ship nerd. He painted watercolour pictures of ships, has lots of books about ships, even had a real ship's porthole put into an internal wall in my parents' house. So he was that nerdy about it. And so I grew up going on these ships, and a lot of them weren't cruise ships. They were sort of really ships going from A to B. So really quite basic. There were mail ships. We're talking back in the 1970s and 80s here, because I'm quite old. But it was a real experience, and I loved being at sea. And on one journey, I met a group of school children who were traveling the world with their teachers. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. They were away for 3 months. And I thought, that's so good. And so all those kind of experiences helped me write Peril on the Atlantic and the Royal Jewel Plot.
How old were these kids going around with their teachers?
3 months. 3 months at sea. And they would have lessons in the morning, and in the afternoon.
Were they primary or secondary school children?
I think they were lower secondary school, so they must have been sort of like 12, 13, so quite young enough for me to be friends with them. And yeah, I was like blown away by what an experience they were going on around the world.
That is amazing. And imagine doing that. That's incredible.
I know.
All that's kind of fed into your writing and what we're doing today. And now we've got some school questions for you. I wonder, after we do a couple of questions, do you have a little reading you could sort of give us from the book, just a little kind of taste of it? So let's this is from the Shade Primary School. How do you kind of mentioned this a bit already, but how do you build on your ideas? So obviously get the idea, you sort of mentioned a little bit, and how do you then sort of build on that a bit more? So I'll hand it over to you to answer that.
That's a really good question, actually. So I'm very much one for because I'm writing mysteries, and I'm always thinking of red herrings and how can I sort of move the reader away from really thinking what the truth is. And so I think when I'm building on ideas, I kind of make lists of what is the worst thing that could happen to this character next. And it's always, what's the worst thing that could happen? So I kind of keep building on that. I think of lots of really bad things. I'm terrible putting my characters through all these tortuous events, and then kind of building the plot that way. And I never used to be a plotter, But with the series, I absolutely had to plot it out, and I would write these 5,000 word scene plans and really kind of get to grips with what was happening in each story, because I had this overall story arc, and I knew it was going to be a trilogy quite early on. So yeah, it's a bit of detail.
It must be quite something like the worst thing that happened, because there's quite a few worse things that could happen. So it
quite
must
a lot
be,
of bad, yeah, a lot of bad things.
Like choosing the one. So maybe not.
Yeah.
I'll do that one. Here we go. So this is from Kelty Primary School in Fife in Scotland. What do you do to make your characters relatable?
Oh, that's a lovely question.
Yeah, good question. That.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's just about making them human and not perfect, because nobody's perfect, and giving them little flaws. I mean, Alice, for example, she tries her best. She really does, but she kind of dives in and makes lots of mistakes. And maybe I'm a little bit like that too sometimes. I don't know. I think there's probably a bit of myself in all my characters. But yeah, I think it's giving them those little human flaws. And Sonny, for example, he tries very hard to do the right thing and always wants to impress his father and make sure he's being safe. But, you know, he can't help but be drawn into all these Alice's crazy plans.
I was I don't know, I spoke to you once, and they said this, another author, and they said for their characters, what they do is take elements of themselves, say like I don't know, but you know, good and bad, and then they just sort of say, what if I was like, if I expanded that, what would I be like? You know, if that was more of my personality. And it must be quite a nice way to explore different elements that are of yourself in a way and put them into characters. Do you sort of find that in that sense?
I find that, I mean, I do character sheets, so I kind of, and also it helps me keep track, because having written 6 books now, you kind of lose track of what sort of characters you've developed. And I try and make all my characters quite different, and different personalities. And so I do write a sheet of, you know, and there's the standard stuff is like, what do they like to eat? What do they like to do in their free time? You know, lots of little things like that helps build up a character profile. I think that can be helpful when you're writing any story.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. That's really good advice. Really good advice for the children watching as well, building their own characters, how they do it.
Yeah.
We'll hand over to you for give us a little reading, a little taster of Royal Jewel. Must be difficult to choose this bit without giving too much
I know.
away.
Well,
so
yeah, it is really difficult. I mean, you know the premise that there's an octopus on board and it's guarding a very precious opal. So the octopus, here we have a little one here, the blue-ringed octopus from the Pacific Ocean, and it is about this size. Its head is about the size of a golf ball, and it's guarding this opal, and it's a very, very deadly octopus. One bite and you are toast. But both have gone missing from this aquarium, and a big search is on. So we've got Alice's father, Dorothy, who is the children's tutor, and Alice and Sonny, and they're trying to think about what happens next. They've just discovered that this opal and the octopus have gone missing. So it's a reading from chapter 9.
Okay, hand over to you. Here we go.
Okay. The yacht is being searched from top to bottom by 2 security guards brought across from the HMS Glowworm, said Father, as he, Dorothy, Alice and Sonny huddled together on the prow. Even the king's suites, asked Dorothy, putting up her parasol to shield herself from the searing sun. Father shook his head. No, those are out of bounds until he departs, but his staff's cabins will be searched. But that's hardly fair, protested Dorothy. What if one of the king's own staff is the culprit and has hidden the gem in his room? Alice remembered with a jolt seeing the king's diary on the writing desk in the library. The king seemed quite taken with the opal, she said, also thinking back to the conversation she'd overheard between him and Mrs. Simpson on their first night on board. Sonny barked out a laugh. You think the king stole the opal? Father pressed a finger to his lips. Quiet, Sonny. To even suggest such a thing is, well, it could be considered treason. I don't think Alice is serious, Father, said Sonny with a smirk. Alice bit back her disappointment at how easily her suggestion had been dismissed. Sonny's smirk dropped. Everyone's making a fuss about the opal, but what about Olive? Did she bite the opal thief? There have been no reports of anyone falling sick on board, said Father. It's a mystery, all right, said Dorothy. It seems mysteries have a habit of following this family around, said Father, raking his hands through his hair. If the opal isn't found, then not only the yacht, but all of its fixtures and fittings too will be taken as compensation. A cannonball-sized weight sat heavy on Alice's shoulders. You mean the safe, Mother's portrait in the library, and everything else? Their father gave a miserable nod, and Alice looked at him helplessly. Things really were going from bad to worse.
Dun, dun, dun. There we go. Brilliant. No, it's amazing because it is a real mystery, a real thriller, real sense of that whodunit thing, and I love all that. Well, thanks to my wife who introduced me to it, and reading your books, which is fantastic stuff. Amber will join us later on for the author panel for a few more of your questions and a bit of fun later on. But for now, thank you very much. The Royal Jewel Plot is out now, as is the first one, of course, and the third one out later in the year. Round of applause. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Speak to you later on. Thank you very much. So that's Anne-Marie there with the Royal Jewel Plot, a fabulous book, all twists and turns, and a lot of fun reading it. Now it's time to welcome my next guest. It is, of course, Mr. Guy Bass. Hello, Guy.
Hi.
Back again. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're fantastic. So we spoke about it already. It's probably better if you hold it up because it's Taking Shelter, Hugh Dunnit mystery. I just want to say first of all, I laughed an awful lot. And just to give you my father-in-law, who's an elderly gentleman now, he loves puns. He loves a pun. You know, this book outdoes him, which is saying something. And the amount of puns in this is quite extraordinary. Very, very, very funny book. Tell us a bit more about it. So I know you can't. It's got that sort of whodunit thing, a bit like Anne-Marie's, but obviously a different style. Tell us a bit more about Hugh, who he is, and you kind of mentioned in your story there, without giving too much away, and who the suspects are in this book. Could you do that? We wouldn't give too much away if you said who the suspects are, would it?
No. That's
They are on the front cover. I just thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
You know. So tell us a bit more about Hugh and who the suspects are. So I'll hand over to you now, Guy. Here we go.
Well, Hugh, because I wanted to sort of, I had this idea of writing a whodunit, but then I realized I really wasn't up to it. It's really hard. I mean, my hat goes off to Anne-Marie. Writing a genuine whodunit is really difficult. And then I sort of got the idea of writing a story about a character who basically sees mysteries, sees cases to be cracked wherever he goes, and sort of generates these mysteries himself. And that's really how it all sort of started. And so when Hugh sort of decides that he needs to clear Shelter's name, he also decides that he has to find who the real culprit is. And so he ends up with a series of suspects. I'm gonna read a bit about the first suspect. So I won't tell you too much about him. And then we have his over-the-road neighbour, Pearl, and then Miss Adwell, his teacher. All of them at some point become suspects.
It's really what I love about it is the is that obviously it's great illustrations by Lee Cosgrove, but the bit when he thinks of himself in detective mode, it jumps into I'll show you the kids. So you've got like the conventional writing here, and then we jump into sort of a comic strip element when he goes into that sort of detective 1940s detective kind of mode, and I love that element, and it's really good for, I expect, for kids reading to get that sort of contrasting kind of styles and that. Who decided? Was that something you decided sort of first up? How did that come about?
Entirely the idea of my editor, Charlie Shepherd, who I wrote the entire thing in prose, and showed it to my editor, and she was like, "What if we have some sort of comic element in it?" And I was like, "Oh, when he basically goes into detective mode, we could have this like really noirish kind of thing." And Lee absolutely nailed it. He just got it straight away, and it's
and it really adds to the sort of magic of it. This is going to be the first of a series, I presume. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So the second one I've written, and that's sort of being illustrated at the moment. So yeah.
Does he become more? I don't know. You can sort of say more detector-ish as he goes on? Does it take more of his time up, more of his mind up? Is it sort of as he goes through, or you know what I mean? Because it's kind of his alter ego in a way, isn't it? But it's kind of
absolutely. Yeah. And in the second one, he sort of ends up with like a sidekick. So he's got a kind of Watson character in the second one. So I suppose he does lean into the detective persona maybe a little bit more.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. We've got a couple of questions for you here, Guy, from schools. I know you're going to give us a reading in a moment as well. So it's a little Thurrock Primary School in Essex. Do you laugh a lot when writing your books? Let's hand over to you.
I'd love if I was just sitting at my desk, just guffawing. No, I don't. I mean, maybe occasionally I smile when I'm feeling particularly pleased with myself, but no, because the problem is actually kind of crafting comedy, like actually writing jokes, is it's quite hard work.
Yeah.
So and there's a lot of sort of just making sure they're as good as they can be and refining and stuff. So I wish I just spent the whole day laughing. But
There's some good puns in there, though. There are some really good ones. Here, but that's good. Here we go. So I have some primary school question. Which of your, this is, I guess, off across all of your books, I guess. So which of your characters would you most like to be for the day if you could? Which is quite a huge question. It goes across a lot of your characters.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I'd probably have to pick Skeleton Keys.
Yeah.
Because Skeleton Keys, have I got? Yeah, Skeleton Keys he's a skeleton with keys for fingers, and each key opens the door to a different hidden world. So he can basically travel wherever he wants in the world and beyond. So I think that, I mean, if I was going to have a day,
That's pretty cool, isn't it? That's pretty, I mean, it's a nightmare kind of sort of do various things in the household, but it's great for opening, the cleaning and stuff is a trouble.
Exactly, yeah. But,
apart from that's good. What we can do is, Guy's can give us a reading in a minute, but I just wanted to. I know it's a bit odd having Guy here, but there's a video on Guy's website. Guy's website was up here, so on Guy Bass Books, and it's about Guy's school visits, which all our authors do, and many authors do, and you may have had some in your school already. But it just made me laugh an awful lot, and it kind of gives introduction to Skeleton Keys and a couple of other Guy's books as well. So, Guy, if that's all right, I'm just going to quickly show the this little edited version of your video, which I thought was very, very funny, and then we're back for a reading from Hugh Dunnit as well. So this is about 40 seconds. Here we go.
And I'll show you all sorts of stuff I've got lying around, such as notes, doodles, books I loved as a child, books I love now, artwork, on there. Other stuff. This picture of an otter, as well as readings from my new books, which might go a little something like this. Greetings to dally-wanglers, ring-dingers and snuggabouts, to the imaginary and the unimaginary, to the living, the dead, and everything in between. This. You listen up, 10-Gun Ben. Here in Butts Canyon, we follow the golden rules. As well as poems, jokes, writing tips, reading tips, felt tips, PG tips, and mind reading.
Just thought that was very, very funny. Well done. Really, really funny. Really, really good. Yeah, but more. So that was kind of like you did that like a couple of years ago. And you back us up at the end of COVID, was it? Is that sort of
that was in the thick of COVID, I think. Yeah,
in the thick of COVID, to encourage sort of online visits and stuff.
Yeah.
So, Guy, let's hand over to you for a little reading from Hugh Dunnit, if that's okay. So we're going to hand over to Guy now for a reading from Hugh Dunnit, Taking Shelter. Here.
Fantastic. All right, this is when Hugh decides he needs to find out who really committed the crime of destroying his maths homework. When there's a crime to be solved, there's only one person I trust to crack the case, and that someone is Hugh Dunnit. And I don't mean another Hugh Dunnit who happens to have the same name as me. I mean actual me. It wasn't going to be easy. The hard cases never are. Right now, I had to suspect everyone was a suspect. All I had were questions. Who did the crime? And why? And how? And when? And who? Hugh? Like a monkey with a coconut, I had to bust this thing wide open. Hugh, are you listening to me? I was so busy not listening to Miss Adwell that I didn't hear her ask if I was listening to her. That's when she told me that not listening wasn't an option. At least I think that's what she said. I wasn't really listening. But then she cut to the chase. Your homework, Hugh, she said, pointing to a stack of exercise books on her desk. Where is it? I don't want to talk about it, I said. 4 minutes later, Miss Adwell told me to stop talking about it. But it's a crime, I explained again. C-R-I-M-E, I added. Clearly, I had to spell it out to her. My homework was destroyed, and I'm going to find out who did it. Yes, you mentioned that, Hugh, several times. Can we move on now? Miss Adwell said as the rest of the class laughed their judgmental laugh. They might not have taken my case seriously, but I knew that this crime was going to take some serious solving. So far, I knew the only thing I knew was that I didn't know anything. That was a good to know. But when you're solving a crime, you learn to ignore your head and go with your gut. And my gut was telling me to use my head. There had to be a simple explanation for all this, but the simplest explanation can be the hardest to swallow. I had a hunch this was going to be harder to swallow than my grand's homemade cough medicine with the bits in it. By the end of the...
Carry on, to be continued.
Continued. By the end of the day, I'd drawn a blank. Then again, I was never very good at drawing. Dad met me after school and gave me shelter so I could take her to the park for a walk. Dinner's on the table at 6:45, said Dad as we headed off. Wait, let's make it 6:45. Walking Shelter never involves much walking. Shelter likes to play fetch. And by fetch, I mean I throw her a ball and then she chews it until it's not a ball anymore. As I watched her reduce her latest doom sphere to its individual atoms, Mum's words echoed round my head like a long fart. We'll have to take Shelter to the shelter. How could Mum even think about getting rid of Shelter? She was house-trained, she didn't drool, she licked your face when she was excited, everything you could want out of a best friend. I couldn't imagine life without my dog. I couldn't even imagine imagining it. As far as I was concerned, Shelter was part of the family. Suddenly, a thought hit my brain like a fly on a windscreen. Him. How could I not have seen it earlier? It was the only possible explanation. It was him all along. He did it. It was time to pay him a visit. And the person that he decides definitely ruined his homework and set up his best friend is his little brother Ivor.
Fantastic. That's really good. It gives you a little taste of that, and you can also hear the endless jokes, which are absolutely brilliant. So well done for that. I don't know, that must be really hard to think of those, think are they funny? Are they? You're too close to your own stuff sometimes, I guess, writing, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I there was a time on a different book that my editor asked me to write fewer puns. So this is my comfort zone. It's like
this is my revenge. I got back with this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, Guy, will you join us later on for the author panel a bit later on? But for now, thank you very much, guys. Taking Shelter, a Hugh Dunnit mystery is out now. But thank you very much, Guy. We will we'll speak to you later on. Thanks, Guy. Thank you. Okay, now we have coming up. Oh, we don't have Guy Bass because I'm not him. Now we have coming up. We have Abi Elphinstone. So put your hands together and welcome to Mr Dilly Meets Abi Elphinstone. Hello, Abi. Welcome back. How are you?
Hi.
How's it all going? Good. Are you enjoying listening to the other authors?
Yeah, so much so. I was just curled up in my armchair. I was thinking, I don't need to go on. These guys are great.
It's always fascinating. It's fascinating. It must be fascinating. It's fascinating for me, always interviewing different authors, but it must be fascinating for other authors listening to different people.
It's lovely to hear other people talk about craft and how they invented story ideas.
So, Abi, Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons out now. So this is very. Do you know one of the things I love about this book? First of all, and I've always loved this, and I've said this on previous shows, is that it starts with a map.
With a map.
With a map. That's it. There it is. There. So the illustrations are by Christina Kister, and I think ever since I was a kid and read The Hobbit. With the map at the front. I've always loved the books that start with a map. So tell us a bit more about. So Ember, we'll talk about Ember a bit more in a minute. So tell about the world that Ember's in, and how it relates to kind of where you live in a sense. So let's link those two together. So I hand over to you to tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So I start every story that I write with a map. I used to get told at school that doodling meant you weren't concentrating, but I find that I draw my way into my stories. So I sat down and I thought of this idea that I would write about a girl and a boy who became vets to magical beasts. And then I thought, where are they going to do this? And because I'm dyslexic and my ideas are often really cluttered up, I decide I'm going to draw the landscape that my characters are going to wander around in. So the idea for them being vets, where are they going to do this? I drew the landscape that I currently live in. So I live on the east coast of Scotland. And it's very beautiful up here. There are islands that rise vertically out of the sea. Seals slip silently through the harbours. There are castles perched on cliff tops. There are wild ponies roaming the mountains. There's a whale's jawbone on the mountain nearest to us. So I feel it's impossible not to find yourself on an adventure in a place like this. So it felt like a really natural landscape to write about. So I drew a landscape that's familiar to me. I put lots of landmarks on it that I often visit. I renamed them. So it's the North Sea, but I've called that the Swirling Soup. That's the bay near where Ember lives. And then I just get another coloured pen and I draw a wiggly line through my map. And that becomes my character's journey, because all plot is a main character wanting something and then obstacles are thrown in their way. There was a writer called Vladimir Nabokov, and he once said, the writer's job is to get the main character up a tree. Then once they're up there, chuck rocks at them. So Ember and Arno, I basically draw a wiggly line of them going through this map. Like maybe they find something exciting at Monotonous Plod's house. Maybe they're reunited with a friend in the swirling soup, or they're betrayed by someone they really like or thought they liked in Loch Ness.
I love that. I love that quote. I've never heard that before about the tree and the rocks. That's really true. That's really amazing. So Ember, so she's in the village, this village of Yawn.
Yeah,
which is brilliant. We've all been in those villages. If you haven't, kids, you will find one eventually. Village of Yawn. Where is she at the beginning of the story? You sort of said a little bit about it in your just a minute earlier on. So where do we find ourselves at the beginning of the story? How's she feeling? And then what's that sort of first kind of bit that kind of pushes her towards the adventure she's about to follow? So I hand over to you to sort of tell her where she's at and stuff.
Yeah, so the book opens with Ember down on the sea, on the beach just in front of her house, and she's just skimming stones into the sea, and she's feeling a bit depressed because nothing exciting or interesting ever happens in this seaside village called Yawn. And various things do start happening, as I said when I was doing my 1 minute spree about the story, but an odd smell, I didn't mention, an odd smell descends over the village, and it's a sort of mix between burnt toast and cabbages. And also Ember discovers this strange little creature trapped on a rock out at sea that looks a bit like a hamster, but what would a hamster be doing on a rock out at sea? And then when she gets to class the next morning, her teacher gives her these strange instructions, you know, go to Stonechatter Castle and find Rusty Fizzbang. And all these little points lead towards the same thing, towards this cave cut into the cliffs filled with magical creatures. And I love this idea that any one of us could live in a village that we think is particularly ordinary, that nothing exciting is ever going to happen there. But if you look a little bit closer, there can be magic sort of simmering away beneath the surface of things. And that's this idea with Ember, that everything's ordinary until it's not.
I love about that is that, you know, that's the thing is I think, you know, that magic or that wonder is actually everywhere. I mean, it's actually everywhere. We sort of maybe get used to certain things, but it is. I mean, just being alive is pretty wonderful. So it's an experience, and then seeing you just going out and seeing things and seeing the world and seeing animals and seeing anything really, and just the more you learn, the more you think, oh, this is incredible, you know. So I love that. I love that idea in the book is that suddenly she just launched into this adventure. We've got a couple of questions from a couple of schools for you, if that's all right, Abby, and then we're going to have a little reading from Ember Spark. So Richmond Avenue Primary, London. How do you keep the writing spark alive and think of new, exciting ideas? So I'll hand over to you for that. It's quite a big question, that one. So
yeah, so how do you come up with new and exciting ideas? Loads and loads of different ways. So it can be random. I was shopping once in a shop called TK Maxx, and I looked at this shower gel, Pecksniff, and I thought, that's a bit of a silly name for a shower gel. And then I thought, actually, that's quite a cool surname. So the first book that I wrote was called The Dream Snatcher, and that's got a main character, Molly Pecksniff, named after a shower gel from TK Maxx. I've had story ideas where I've gone on an adventure. I went all the way to Mongolia to meet an eagle huntress, a 12-year-old girl who has a golden eagle who flies out and captures animals and uses the fur from those animals to make her clothes, because it's so cold in Mongolia that you won't survive the winter without having a golden eagle to retrieve animals' fur. It was so cold when I was there that my eyelashes froze shut in the middle of the night. So in Sky Song, that was inspired by this adventure that I went on all the way out in Mongolia. I've been on shopping trips in the supermarket, Asda, and I was looking for some hummus, and I came across some baba ganoush. I was like, that is a really cool character name. So there's a little creature in this book, Mrs. Riccatini's pet puppy called Baba Ganoush. So I find that story ideas are all around us. You've just got to keep your eyes open. And I like to store my ideas up in an ideas collector. You guys can do this with an egg box, where each different compartment is a different type of idea, like names, portals, really annoying thing your mum or dad or your carers say, funny things your teacher always says, catchphrases. And I think everything behind every story is a what if. You just look at the world in a slightly sideways way. What if there were actually magical beasts lurking in our very everyday village?
That's I love the egg box idea. It's really, really good as well. It's really fantastic. I love the idea between Mongolia, sort of like who's been there, then Asda. You know, you know what I mean? From one to the other. Let's have answer this one quite quickly. I know, and then we can go for a reading. But I know this isn't so. St. Luke's Primary School Cannock. What inspired you to write a book about dragons? I know it isn't exclusively about obviously dragons. There's other animals and people in it as well. But why sort of dragons? What inspired you to have dragons in this?
So I have 3 kids, and they are obsessed with How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Howell, and they love Toothless. They've got the soft toy, the Lego, the posters, the books, everything. And I think every story is radically improved by the presence of a dragon. They're so exciting. Nothing's going to be boring around dragons. And I loved reading about dragons in fairy tales when I was younger. And Jackie Morris, she's one of my favourite illustrators. She has a book called Tell Me a Dragon. And it's this idea that everybody in the world has a different type of dragon. They might be huge and buried into the mountainside or the rocks or something, or they might be tiny, so tiny they could live inside your ear, whisper secrets to you. So I've had a long fascination with dragons over the years, from my kids, from books I loved as a kid. In The Crackle-Dawn Dragon, that's another book of mine, there's a dragon who won't eat you. He'll be your friend, so long as you feed him your deepest, darkest secrets.
Oh, that's a great. I love that idea. That's brilliant. That's a great idea as well, isn't it? Because that's quite scary as well. It's amazing. That's really good. I hand over to you now for a reading from Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons. Now, if that's all right, Abby. So I hand over to you. This is Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons. Here we go.
So I'm going to read from chapter 1. Chapter 1. The thing about magic is that it's terribly clever, and the thing about grown-ups is that they very often aren't, or at least not in the way that matters. Discovering magic, you see, is about noticing it's there in the first place. And most grown-ups are way too busy to spend time watching and wondering and sniffing out secrets. Children, on the other hand, never miss a thing. But even the most curious child can take a while to sniff out magic, because magic knows where to hide. And it's not in faraway lands, long-lost kingdoms. It's right here, under our noses, in our forests and rivers, in our oceans and caves, in the villages around us where nothing interesting or exciting ever seems to happen. These are the places where everything happens, where magic lurks and adventures start. And so it was with the sleepy village of Yorn. Perched above the cliffs on the east coast of Scotland, Yorn was a huddle of unmemorable cottages lining a single unmemorable street. Even geographers forgot to include it on their maps. There was a small school, a garage, and a post office. And beyond the village lay the sea, known to the locals as the Swirling Soup. It was too wild to steer a boat across and too cold for tourists to bother visiting. And yet, there was magic here. Had you been looking out to sea at midnight, you might have glimpsed the tip of a large domed head as a kraken surfaced for the briefest of moments to feel the night on its skin. Had you had nerve to climb the steepest cliff, you might have stumbled across the phoenix nesting there. Had you been able to part the clouds on the gloomiest day in Yorn, you might have noticed a flash of dragon wings tearing across the sky. All of this, 10-year-old Ember Spark had so far missed. She had lived in Yorn for as long as she could remember, and nothing interesting or exciting ever seemed to happen there. Yorn was a disappointment on an epic scale, the most unlikely place for an adventure, and Ember was convinced of this fact, right up until the moment she accidentally found herself rescuing a magical beast.
Fabulous, fantastic. That's fantastic, Abby. I love the. By the way, I love the flying bathtub.
Yeah,
very inspired that. Really, really good. So this is the first of. Is it going to be a trilogy? Is that right?
There are 3 books so far. There's Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons, which is out now. Then there's Ember Spark and the Frost Phoenix, which comes out in October.
Okay.
And it's about a never whale who sprouts diamonds from his blowhole. So there's somebody that's trying to steal magical beasts, and if one of them sprouts diamonds, then he's going to be after it because he could sell it for millions. And then there's a 3rd book coming next year. That's
fantastic. Abby, you'll be joining us in a minute for more questions from schools and all this. But for now, Ember Spark and Thunder Dragons is out now. Thanks very much, Abby. And we'll speak to you in just a moment. Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, so that's Abi Elphinstone there. And now it's time to welcome my final guest before we get them all back for a bit of fun. Please welcome Mr Dilly meets Nicky Smith Dale. Hello, Nicky.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. A pleasure to have you on. I hope you've enjoyed listening to everybody.
I've just been loving listening to everyone else. It's fascinating.
It's really fascinating. It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I always find fascinating how different people approach different things and the ideas where they come from, the sort of landscape or sort of influences from when they're a child or all kinds of things kind of wrapped up in there. For your book, let's go. Betty Steady. Oh, it's a bit strange on my screen. So Betty Steady and the Toad Witch. It is, I think the word riotous comes to mind, and very, very funny and very, very fast. Actually, when I spoke to Guy earlier about sort of his puns and humor in the book. This book is also sort of packed with them, literally. Tell us a little bit more. I know you said in your 1 minute earlier on. Tell us a bit more about Betty Steady, who she is, and maybe her inspiration, where that character comes from. So tell us a bit more about her and that inspiration, and kind of like where she is at the beginning of the story there.
So Betty Steady is, as I said earlier, she's a massive show off. And I think for me, when I came up with her, it was a bit of a case of writing someone who I want to be a bit more like. So I've always wanted to be really confident and really sure of myself. And that's exactly what Betty is. So she is a strong, fearless warrior. She is the guardian of Wobbly Rock Castle. So she defends her castle from all the baddies that try to attack it. She's an amazing fighter, but she knows it. So she knows she is amazing. She's very arrogant. And what's always fascinated me with some stories is how you can have a really powerful, amazing character, but then something happens to take away that power, and you have to see how they deal with that. And so in this book, the Toad Witch, as you can see here, amazingly drawn by Sarah Horn, she cuts Betty down to size quite literally, because she casts the shrinking spell on her, and Betty finds herself getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until she's really tiny, and she thinks, oh, now I'm not so strong and tough anymore. What am I going to do?
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. Well, one of the things about that is what she thinks she is, and then what she has to sort of like draw upon in terms of when that's taken away from her, as you said, when she loses her powers. And she has to sort of think about other people and friends and kind of moving forward and stuff like that. One of the devices you use to sort of do that throughout the book is using that, having the narrator, Salvador Catflap. So I think it was a great idea. What way do you think do it in that sort of way, having that narrator to kind of, it's like a sort of this old tale of yore that I can. What was
it's set in this kind of fantasy faux medieval land. So I thought it would be really fun to have a kind of narrator character that introduces part of the story, gives you a size and extra information. You can see here that Salvador Catflap there. And he tells us a bit about the world of Wobbly Rock. And really, again, it was just a chance to just be silly and funny and to kind of comment on the story as it was happening. And to kind of give it that extra little bit of silliness.
Well, as you said, the Sarah Horn, the illustration, it really brings that to life, and it kind of.
Her illustrations are absolutely incredible. I mean, when you write, you kind of picture what they're going to look like in your head, and then when I got sent them, I was just astounded because she just made it so much better than I could have even ever imagined.
It must be. I mean, it's for all of you, I guess. I mean, there's some guests I have on the show are author illustrators. Obviously, they illustrate their own book, so it must be amazing to see your characters brought to life. I mean, Guy was saying about obviously getting that, but the editor said about the comic strip element, and obviously Abby's book's got that brilliant Christina Kister on it. A.M. Howell, who's the illustrator? I don't know who did the. Marco. Oh God, I can't say it. Guadalupe. I don't know. That sounds about right for A.M. Howell. But like Abby's book, you've got a kind of a lovely map there.
You can't beat a map at the beginning of a book, can you?
I just love it. I love a map.
And it's always been my dream. So this is my first book. I'm a debut author.
Yeah.
And you kind of, when you're writing and you kind of dream about what might happen one day and being published. And I always thought, oh, imagine having a map in your book. And now it's here, and it's just incredible. You can see it there, Wobbly Rock.
It's endlessly fascinating, isn't it? I don't know. It's amazing. Actually, we've got a question from a school that kind of links to your, because obviously this is your debut book. Beach High Primary School, St. Albans. How does it feel when you hold your very own book for the first time? Obviously, all our authors have experienced that, but obviously, as this is your debut, how did that feel?
It was amazing. I mean, you do dream about it, and when you're slogging away writing for years and years, and you think, oh, could this dream come true? But it's a very long process. So I got my book deal 2 years ago. So because it's heavily illustrated, everything takes a long time to happen. So from signing my book contract to actually holding my book in my hands was coming up to 2 years. So it was a very big build up. But yeah, the moment I opened it up and I held it in my hands, I have to say I did have a little tear in my eye.
Oh, I'm not surprised. It must be the same for everybody, because it's such an amazing, you know, so but it must be an amazing thing to have that sort of feeling.
Yeah.
It's sort of concrete. It's there, isn't it? You did it. You know, it's a beautiful thing. Let's have a quick question here. Then we're going to go into a little reading from Betty Steady, if that's okay. So saying you see primary school in Bolton, was writing your best subject at primary school, or is it something you've developed as you got older?
That's a really great question.
Yeah,
that's
good question,
great. I was always very creative. I loved making up stories. I was always putting on shows and plays for my parents. They said I had my head in the clouds and I was a bit of a daydreamer. But when it came to writing, I definitely wasn't the best in my class. I had the ideas, but I wasn't always the best speller. I didn't always have the best handwriting. So my advice to young writers is to persevere with it. So for me, I got better over the years. So I wrote different genres, different things, tried out different ways of writing. And the more I practiced, the better I got. And I found that I kind of found my niche with comedy. I'd written a few more serious books over the years and nothing had quite clicked in the same way. And then one day I sat down and I thought, well, what sorts of books do I love? What really speak to me? And I thought, well, I love funny books. And I decided to just throw myself in and just to basically write the silliest story I could think of and just throw all those jokes in. And I was kind of really authentically me with this book. I kind of thought, you know what, this is me, this is my sense of humour. And that's kind of what worked.
And then it comes across as well. And it's just a sort of like a wonderful sort of, I don't know, sort of a explosion of kind of joy, really.
Yeah, that's the right word. It is
kind of, I know it is, and I love that. I love that. It's got that sort of anarchic kind of feel to it as well, which is brilliant. Can you give us a little reading from the book?
I would love to.
Give us a little reading. So this is Nicky Smithdale with a reading from Betty Steady and the Toad Witch.
Okay, so this is from the beginning of the book. And Betty Steady has gone off to fight a three-headed viper. And everyone's at the castle waiting for her to come back. The room went silent. Indeed, it was Betty Steady, but she looked proper rough. "That blasted viper got me," Betty murmured, her face pale and smeared with mud. Hunched like a wilted spinach leaf, she steadied her tall frame on Simon Anderson's reins. Blood dripped down her chin, and her wet brown curls clung to her cheeks like a gang of tired slugs. "Betty," cried the king, "are you hurt?" Betty approached the throne, grimacing with each slow step. "Forgive me, your majesty." She held out a shaking hand to the princesses Pam and Pam. "I have failed you, my friends." As she passed the second royal flag bearer, she stumbled. "Johnny Logflume?" She looked up and clutched his tunic. "I have disgraced your flag, Johnny Logflume." Johnny Logflume looked around awkwardly. "Is she all right?" Betty slid to the floor. "The venom is taking hold. I can see spots. I can see into next Pancake Day." "My goodness," cried Fig, rushing to her side. "Where did it bite you?" "Fig," whispered Betty. Her voice wobbled like an uneven cafe table. "Is that you? Come closer, dear imp." The imp clutched her hand. "Don't give up, Betty. You can fight this." "There's something I've always wanted to ask you." Betty leaned her head against Fig's. "Something important." "Of course, great guardian. Ask me anything." Fig's scrawny chest rattled wildly. "Anything." As the crowd listened in flabbergasted disbelief, Betty let out a weak cough and looked the imp in the eyes. "Would you?" Her words were punctuated with shallow gasps. "Would you please, please take my sword?" She pulled the great weapon from her scabbard. "Oh, Betty!" Fig's eyes brimmed with tears. "It would be my honour." "Take it, little imp. Take it away." Betty cracked a smile. "Clean off the snake slime, then give it a polish for me, will you, while I party my face off." The imp screwed up his forehead. Huh? Betty leapt to her feet, did 3 cartwheels and grabbed Johnny Logflame's flag. No one can defeat the guardian of Wobbly Rock. She waved the custard yellow flag high in the air and wiggled her hips. That viper didn't stand a chance. The king beamed. Well, tickle my belly with a fluffy duster. She did it.
Fantastic. Well done. Thank you very, very much. So there we go. And there's the illustration. Yeah, they're a wonderful illustration. So Betty Steady and the Toad Witch. There's going to be other adventures of Betty Steady, I presume?
Yeah, the next one in the series will be out early next year.
Early next year. Fantastic. And we're all back. Fantastic. So welcome back. And it's been a pleasure talking to you today. We have a few questions, a few from schools and a few sort of quite silly ones that I'm going to send in. I've got for you as well. So we're going to start with this one. So you go on. Here we go. What is something about your writing process you think is really weird? And Anne-Marie, we'll start with you.
Something that is really weird. That, I don't know, I often write on my phone. Is that weird?
I don't know. I think that's okay. Write on your phone.
Okay.
That's okay. Guy, anything about your writing process and maybe you think is really weird?
I mean, I sometimes think it's weird that any of them end up as books. Because usually I just write, sort of write a load of nonsense and then hope that something might come of it. So yeah, I know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I suppose I write upside down.
That sounds about right. That sounds good. And it's amazing what comes to you when you do that. You've got to try different things. Nicky, what about yourself? Anything?
I mean, very similar to Guy. Like, I just write a load of nonsense and think, does that work? I guess my character names are particularly weird, and I kind of take them from random places. So one of my characters is called LMNOP, and that came from when I was just singing the alphabet to my son. I just thought, oh, you kind of say the phrase LMNOP as one block, don't you? And I just thought, oh, that'll make a great name.
So we get an insight. We got Abby's obviously earlier on talking about Asda. So it's amazing with the inspiration cover. Abby, is there anything from yourself that you think that's kind of weird about?
Yeah, I pinch the crazy things that my kids say. So I've got a son who's 6 and he was having a nightmare the other day and he was crying out in his sleep. So I ran up to his bedroom, opened his door, and he was still asleep, and he screamed the following words: "Don't cut my toenails!" I was like, what? The problem, I always forget to cut them. So I ended up borrowing that and putting it in a book here. And then the other son, the 4-year-old, ran into my bedroom the other day at 5 a.m. and he said, "Hello, I have finished all of my dreams." And I thought, I'm furious that you woke me up, but that's the single best sentence that anyone said pre 6 a.m. So I end up.
That's a good line, isn't it? That's a good line. That's a good line. Here we go. So here we go. This okay, this is quite a good one. This is for me as well. Have your characters ever gone off script? Basically, hijack your story and taken it in a direction you didn't expect. So you had a sort of a plot idea in mind, and then you started writing it, and then sort of something went, oh, and then suddenly it leads the whole thing in a completely different direction from what you first maybe set out to think about. Well, Anne-Marie, any ever happened to you or not?
Yeah, that has happened to me. I think, as I said before, Mistress at Sea, I wasn't very good at plotting at all. And I just kind of like dive into the book. And I think my 3rd book, Mission of the Night Watchers, I think I started to write it during COVID. And it was a bit of a disaster initially. And I sent it off to the publishers. And they were like, oh, I think you've taken a bit of a wrong direction with it. The characters aren't quite doing what we thought they might do. I was like, yeah, that's fair. So it was a bit of a big rewrite amongst the homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you don't get it right every time, do you? You have to kind of go back and re-edit it and do it again.
Okay, you keep trying again. Guy, anything with you? So do you start something and you go, oh, actually, and then it kind of ends up over there?
There's a character in the Skeleton Key series that I mentioned earlier called Daisy, she was only ever going to be in the 1st book, and then just absolutely insisted on staying, basically, and so then became Skeleton Key's kind of partner in problem solving for the whole rest of the series. And
that actually changes the whole dynamic of the book, doesn't it? So in terms of that.
Yeah. So she very much went off script because she was like, "Yeah, I'm sticking around." So I loved writing her, basically. But
yeah. No, it's fascinating, isn't it? And Nicky, what about yourself? Is there any sort of
There's one character in the book who I mentioned in the reading, actually. He's called Johnny Logflume, and he's a bit of a kind of wimpy character throughout the book. And then at the end of the book, I was writing a scene and suddenly he burst into action and started doing some kung fu. And he said, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot I could do kung fu." So I thought that worked quite well because for the whole book, he was very wimpy and scared. And suddenly he's like, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot I could do that."
Well, they do that sometimes with you know, like I don't know, like films or series, don't they? When they have like a main character and then someone, you know, the people are watching it kind of go, "Oh, I really like that sort of side character," and then they have to start really developing that character. Sometimes those side characters become
so
the biggest
Johnny
character.
Logflume features a lot more heavily in the next book.
Yeah. What about you, Abby? Anything?
It's exactly the same as what you were just saying about side characters. So I thought this was a book about a girl, Ember Spark, and a boy, Arno Whisper, and then Ember, I knew she was going to discover this little creature at the beginning of the book on a rock out at sea, and she thinks it's a hamster initially. And I didn't have him playing too much of a big part in the story. And then my editor was like, "Oh, the hamster, he's called 40 Winks. He does nothing but sleep through the whole book." Well, initially he didn't. And then she said, "Wake him up and make him do some fun things because he's a great character." And so many kids, you know, when I meet kids in school visits and stuff, they're always like wanting to talk about their hamster or their bunny and their pets. And so I thought, okay, let's get 40 Winks some limelight. And so
it's a matter, and then it takes up a different direction. Okay, let's have a school question for you all now. So this is actually quite a hard one, actually. We start with you again, Abby, and then we work backwards to Anne-Marie. So this is from, I think I might have spelled the one, Tuxford Primary Academy in Newark. What do all the writers think are the 3 most important ingredients to put into children's books? That's quite big. So Abby, you might have all the same ingredients, which is fine. Abby.
So humour. I think adults take themselves far too seriously in the world. When you switch on the news, it feels like a very scary place. But I think children's books have that opportunity to make everyone laugh again. So humour, peril, a little bit of danger. I think we love that. We're drawn to that as children and as adults. But so humour, peril, and I think imagination. The sense of what if the world is bigger and more wonderful and more extraordinary and more varied than I ever dreamt it was. So yeah, those 3.
Okay. Any other new ones, Nicky? Or just
yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Humour for me is really important for reading, and I think the funnier the better. I think just great characters that spark off each other, have something interesting to say, characters that aren't perfect but maybe learn something in the end, and a great setting, so something you can put lots of description and imagination into.
Fantastic. Okay, it's getting harder now because Guy Marie. So Guy, anything to add to that?
I mean, this is the thing that I constantly have to remind myself of. Get a character that you need that, and then you need that character to want something really, really badly, and then you need something to get in the way of that character getting what they want. I think that, for me, is the bones of any good story.
Yeah, it's the old, you said, Abby, about the character up a tree and throw rocks at him kind of thing. Anne-Marie, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with all of those. I think as well, mystery and adventure and secrets. I think all kids love a good secret. So getting those into a book, I think, can be quite good.
Fantastic. Okay, here we go. So this is just a couple of sort of fun questions here. So here we go. What is your kryptonite as a writer? So as most of the kids watching should know, this kryptonite is obviously Superman's kind of only weakness. It's a rock. If he goes near it, it's from his home planet, then it's all over for him. So what is your kryptonite as a writer, Anne-Marie? Is there any particular thing that's like, oh my gosh, no?
I don't know. I'm going to say my bad shoulder at the moment as my kryptonite at the moment.
Bad shoulder. Superman got that.
Sitting down too much.
Yeah, Guy, what about you?
I'm really bad at picking one path. So I'll often have loads of different versions of the story in my head, and I'm really bad at kind of honing it down into the best version. It takes me ages.
Yeah, that must be really. I imagine that must be really hard for all of you. I guess which direction you take them in. You could sort of do anything, couldn't you, with any of the characters? Nicky, what about yourself?
I think writing lots of serious description. I just want to keep putting jokes in, basically.
That doesn't come across at all. I don't know.
You never know.
That's brilliant. Abby?
I think maybe sometimes because I get so caught up in the plot, I forget to let the characters breathe and their sort of traits and their emotions and their depth of the character grow a little bit. And it's really important when you're writing action and adventure that you give your characters time to develop, to change, to morph into something that they could be the best version of themselves.
Okay, this is a couple of really quick ones, and then we're going to finish today. So, what's your favourite writing snack or drink? Anne-Marie, favourite writing snack or drink?
Tea and a chocolate biscuit.
Tea and chocolate biscuit. Guy,
Coffee all day long.
coffee all day long. Nikki,
Yeah, coffee, probably like 3 coffees and some chocolate.
good stuff. And Abby.
I've never drunk coffee. It's really weird. I used to hate the smell as a kid, and I've never drunk it, so that makes me weird. My favourite snack is white chocolate chip cookies, or you know those yum yums in M&S by the till. They're amazing.
They're fatal. They are. You'll be careful of those. Okay. Anyway, there's a quick one. How many hours a day do you write, Anne-Marie? How many hours a day?
I don't have a set number of hours. I have another job as well. So some days I do no writing and some days I'll write all day. So yeah, totally varies depending on what I'm doing.
Fabulous. Guy.
Yeah, if I have a writing day, I can usually do sort of 4 or 5 hours decently, and then I will often just stare into the middle distance, bang my head against the desk for the rest of the day.
Okay. Which is easily done, isn't it? Nikki.
I've got very young children, and I've got a 1-year-old that's very mad, so it's kind of finding the time really. But if I can find an hour or 2 here and there, that's great.
That's so good. And Abby.
Same as Nikki. I've got 3 little kids, 2, 4, and 6, and I write whenever I can. Sometimes it's just at night when they're all in bed.
That must be hard. They're not waking up saying, my dreams have ended or finished or whatever it is. Thank you very much for being on the show. I want to say a fond farewell. Give each other a big wave. Give all the children a big wave goodbye as well. Give each other a big round of applause. Give yourselves a big round of applause. Why not? And thank you very much. But for now, it's time for me to say goodbye. So as always, it's goodbye from me, my friends, and it's goodbye from me. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.